So my name is Marc Sniukas. I am from Deloitte, where I lead the innovation practice. I'm here also with two colleagues today, Arnaud Willems and Gilles Ponsin. What I want to talk about is how you can use your customer experience or reinvent a customer experience to create new growth. And the example I brought with me is from Pro7. I guess those of you who watch German TV, at least, you have an idea of what Pro7 is. So Pro7 is a TV company, a media company in Germany, one of the largest ones, has a market share of about 30+%, so they lead the market. What's important to know is it's free TV, paid for by advertising. So it's not paid TV, everybody can watch it for free. Now, in 2012, they said, we need to grow. And they wanted to grow by $1 billion over a 6-year period, which was roughly about 40%. Now, imagine your boss comes to you and says, we need to grow our revenues by almost 50%. What would you do? Any ideas? Come to us. Yes, that's a good one. Thank you, John. Yeah. So, typically, what do you try to do? You want to sell more, right? So selling more is what you do to increase revenues. Now, with Pro7, the challenge of selling more is that what do they sell? They sell advertising minutes. And in Germany, like in most European countries, there is a legal limit on how many advertising minutes you can broadcast on average throughout per hour throughout the day. So you have a legal limit of how much you can actually sell. So difficult to raise the units. What else? So if you can't sell more, what do you try? Price. You try to increase the price. Now the challenge again with increasing the price is that for Pro7, who buys TV advertising usually? Big, large companies, right? So the Procters & Gamble's, the Unilevers, Coca-Cola, and so on. They buy a large volume, and because they buy a large volume, they have a lot of negotiating power. And usually it's not even the companies buying themselves, but they buy through an agency, and the agency pools even more volume, and it's not unlikely for an agency to have a discount on the list price of 60–70%. So raising price is also very difficult. So what can you do? You can't sell more, you're going to have a hard time increasing your prices. And what I'd like to offer you is design thinking as a methodology for solving this kind of challenge. Anybody heard about design thinking? Yeah, I think a lot of people these days talk about it. So the question is also, why is design thinking becoming so popular? One of the first big corporates to go for design thinking was IBM. They hired hundreds of design thinkers. They established design thinking digital and innovation studios all over the world. And they actually asked themselves the question about 2 years ago, is it worth it? So did design thinking really bring some benefits? And they had an external company, Forrester, doing some research, and they said, so basic conclusion, a 300% return on investment over a 3-year period by using design thinking. So we have some hard evidence that there is good arguments for using design thinking. Here's just very quickly, I don't expect you to read it, you can have the slides if you like, right? But here's an academic study, and they also looked at what is the benefits of using design thinking for innovation, also digital innovation, and they came up with, so it improves the quality of the choices you make when working in an innovation project. It reduces the risk and the cost of failure. It enhances the likelihood of a successful implementation. Basically, also, like Tobias said, you involve the users, you involve the customer, so that's a key way how to improve the successful implementation. It increases the adaptability, so you are more flexible along the way, right? And what they call creation of local capability sets. So here it's really about you learn new ways of working. So the people engaged in design thinking, using design thinking, they learn new ways of working. They start looking at problems and the business in a new way. Now, what does that look like for design thinking or for Pro7, for example? Now, if you Google design thinking, you're going to find lots of process descriptions like this one. They are all quite similar, And the most important thing is that although they look a little bit differently, they are all based on the same principles. And that's the important thing that I just want to share with you. Now, you start with what is called empathize here. So, like Tobias said, it's all about understanding the problem from a user, a customer point of view. So before you start actually coming up with ideas, you spend time with understanding what is really the problem, what is the challenge that I need to solve. Then you go into defining the problem. So you start with a generic problem like, how are we going to grow by 1 billion or by 50%? But behind that, there are different challenges like, we cannot sell more, some people don't buy. Why don't they buy? Would be something to define. Then only do you start working on ideas. Once you have ideas, instead of doing a big investment and going full scale, you first want to prototype and test it. So you design a small prototype, you test how it works, and then you take it from there. Now, let's have a look at what that looks like for Pro7, or what that actually looked like for Pro7. First question, so empathize with whom? Finding out whom could we sell to that who doesn't buy today. Who buys typically TV advertising? We said it already initially, large companies, right? Who does not buy TV advertising?
Small local companies.
Small companies, startups, so they typically don't buy. So that was the first step, empathizing with these guys, understanding why don't they buy TV advertising from us. So comes the define stage. Why don't small companies buy TV advertising? Money, yeah. Anything else you could think of?
Not the right target.
Not the right target? Yeah. Content, yeah. So they maybe don't have the content, yeah. Need to be local. That's not an issue. That's something that Pro7 can do. So if you, for Luxembourg, it's not so much of a problem, but also in Germany, you can have different advertisement in Hamburg than in Bavaria, for example. And if you watch German TV, or also French TV, if you watch the same thing in Belgium and in France, you're very likely to have different advertisements. Right? So that's a challenge they can solve. So they found out, so they went out, they spoke to customers or potential customers, why don't you buy? And obviously, first thing, you can't afford it, or they can't afford it. Second thing, well, I don't want to spend the money, even though I had the money, I don't want to spend it on something with an uncertain outcome. So I don't want to go the risk of losing the money. So that's something a little bit more granular than just I don't have the money. And those who were ready said, well, I want to spend the money, I'm ready to take the risk, but I've never done it, like some of you said, so I don't know how this works, and I don't know how this could be managed. So that's the challenges that you need to solve. Any ideas on how you could solve them? So now we go into ideation. So if you were Pro7, what would you do? Yes, hire consultant. That's a very good answer. Very good answer. Gilles, can you pass a business card? Okay. Anything else? What could the customer experience look like to resolve those challenges for the small and medium companies?
Have incentives.
Have incentives. So have some kind of performance fee to take some of that risk away of paying money without a certain outcome.
And to give interest for the final client.
Interest for the final client.
To improve your company.
Yeah. That's what it's all about, right? So it's all about creating a new customer experience now. So what did Pro7 do? Is that in terms of the offering and the customer experience, what will we do? We will give the access to the media for free. So we eliminate the financial invest upfront. We eliminate the risk. And we're going to help you with the media strategy, the planning, and the production. So basically, we do everything for you. Our customer experience is full stop, one-stop shop, if you like. You come to us, you don't have to pay, and we're going to do everything. Sounds great, doesn't it? Now, what is the issue with that? Where's the money? Where does the money come from? Any ideas? What could you do? Take a share of the revenues. Yeah, right. So exactly, that's what they did. So they came up with this idea of media for revenue. So I said, as a customer experience, we're going to take away all your risk. We're going to take away all the work. We're going to do it, and as a result, what we'd like to have is a share of the revenues that we create. So this was the initial idea, media for revenue. Now, prototyping it and testing it. How can you prototype and test something like this? What would you usually do? Probably write a business case, go to a couple of committees for approval, right? Does that sound familiar? Once you have the approval, you start hiring people, putting together the teams, right? And then 12 months have gone by and not much has actually happened, right? So how could you test something like this? Talk to companies, right? So you just talk to companies. So what Pro7 did is, and the idea here is, if a picture is 1,000 words, then a prototype is worth 1,000 meetings. So you try to eliminate the meetings and go for the prototyping right away. And actually, while you're doing that, so you go in iterative cycles, you try something, you learn from it, and then you use your learnings to improve your idea, and you go into the next cycle. Pro7 just issued a press release. So very simple, no big investment, no money spent, just a press release. They announced, this is what we'd like to do. Is anybody interested? And if you're interested, just get in touch with us. They had dozens of companies who wrote them, startups, small and medium companies, and they just sat down and selected a handful, really, it was really just 5, that they wanted to work with. And there was no big team behind it. It was a VP of innovation at the time, and he had an assistant who just came from university, so just finished school on the team. They had no sophisticated criteria. They actually didn't know what they were looking for. They didn't know how to evaluate what kind of company to work with or not. I mean, this was really a new to the world innovation, so nobody had done something like this ever before, so nobody could tell you what is going to make it successful, what to look out for. Right? So they just picked 5, and they started working with these 5. So this is where the testing and that iterative cycle starts to come into play. So they did it, initially, as I said, first cycle of the idea, if you like, media for revenue, no specific company focus. So they worked with these 5, and they learned a couple of things. First thing they learned was, well, okay, if we do it completely for free, very often, especially startups, they are not very interested, committed to the idea. So we have to chase them to get the information we need. They don't provide any content. So if we have a fixed fee, it takes a little bit away the risk for Pro7, but it also increases a little bit the commitment from our potential client. Right? You know the saying, if it doesn't cost anything, then it's not worth anything. Right? So people were not that motivated. And the fee was very, very limited. I think we were talking about 10,000 euros. So compared to the 100,000s that you usually have to pay for a TV advertising campaign, it was really a very, very minimal investment. They stuck with the media for revenue share, and they started focusing on online businesses. So one of the learnings they had in the first cycle was they had a local bio or sustainable lemonade producer that they had in the portfolio, and what they discovered is, so they created a lot of demand for the lemonade, but the company was not able to supply. So people would go to the shop, and then there is no lemonade. Right? So all the media attention and media power was for nothing. And they learned the second thing, that for offline businesses, it was very difficult to track whether the advertisement actually led to some results or not. Whereas for online businesses, they became very sophisticated in evaluating. We air the advertisement at 8 p.m., and at 8:10, we see the clicks and the sales on the website go up. So it was very easy for them. So they said, let's focus on online business. So they did that, a couple more rounds, and then at some point they said, well, gee, mostly also for startups, media for revenue is nice, but it would have been even nicer had we had a piece of the equity. So one of the first success stories, for example, was Zalando. Some of you might know Zalando is an online shoe shop, so Amazon for shoes and clothes and lifestyle at these days. But so it would have been interested to have some equity. So they introduced that on top of the media for revenue. So media for revenue is still there, but they learned that they have to do media for equity as well. And they also became more sophisticated for which type of online businesses their target audience works best. So they don't offer this to any kind of online business anymore, but they have very specific focus areas, very specific domains that they are interested in. And this has evolved into what they call a portfolio of strategic investments. Right? One of these investments is travel. So one vertical, if you like, that they focus on is everything that has to do with online travel. Right? And an objective they have nowadays is that they want to be the number one in online travel. So online booking, websites, hotel websites, stuff like Trivago, weather.com, all of that, or wetter.de, actually, that's part of the Pro7 business model. But this is not something they had in mind when they started, and that was not an objective. That was something that they learned along the way, that they could have a real powerful customer experience around everything that's that. And at the end of the day, they did not only achieve the 1 billion, but they managed to increase their revenues by 2.15 billion, almost doubled it within 6 years. So I think that's quite impressive. When did you have last to raise your revenue targets? So they actually raised them twice in the period because it was working so much better than expected. And 50% out of that new revenues is coming from completely new businesses that did not exist 6 years ago. And it all started with focusing on what does our customer want, why don't they buy, and how can we make them buy. Now, I said design thinking is a process. It's also, we present it very linear usually, but this is what it feels like when you really do it. So when we do it with customers, we always tell them, if it's too easy, then you're probably you're doing something wrong. It needs to have confusion, ambiguity. All that is part of the process. It's also a set of tools. If you Google again, design thinking, for each of these steps, you will find very specific tools. And the most important thing, though, it's a mindset. So it's a mindset where you say, we start with the customer, we start with the human-centered, we focus on iterative action, so we want to learn. It's very co-creative, collaborative, so we want to work with the users, we want to work with people internally, we want to work together with the customers to develop this solution, get feedback, learn from them. You should be visual and tangible, so create prototypes, do something instead of just talking about it, and have a holistic approach. And what we mean by holistic approach in design thinking is that you're always looking for a solution that is customer focused, that is feasible from a technology, business, legal point of view, financing point of view, if you like, and you want to have something that's also viable for you as a business. So it's nice to have good ideas, but as we saw earlier, you might have good ideas internally, but then the customer is not happy about it. So we try to have these three things in balance. Now, I presented some stuff from Pro7. There are many other companies who did it. I think I have like 3 minutes or 2.5 probably right now left. Just to give you from an industrial company, which is very, very nice, is Hilti. So you probably know Hilti, power tools, right? So they are very, very good at innovating and creating new growth around customer problems, starting with customer problems. And they have a view of the customer where they say, so you might say the customer is the guy who holds the drill on the construction site. And they do a lot of innovation around that, new products. But they started introducing things for the CFO, so the guy who has to pay for all these tools that are being used. Right? And they started innovating around that. So these days, you no longer have to use, or you don't have to buy the tools if you don't want to. You can rent them. So they have introduced what they call fleet management. So you can rent all the tools that you need from Hilti, so you don't have to pay. You don't have to buy them. You don't have them on the balance sheet, but you pay a monthly subscription. And Hilti, again, complete customer experience. They take care of your inventory management. If you say we need this and that on our construction site in Dubai, they're going to ship it there. So they take care of all these things. They have similar things for procurement and so on and so forth. So very broad. And something also nice thing to look into, John Deere, for example. So they do tractors. They have gone away from tractors, but they still do tractors. But on top of that, they thought, so the guys who buys our tractors, what are the challenges they have and what solutions can we offer them in terms of customer experience to solve all these challenges? So one of the challenges you have is, if you are a farmer, weather, having to manage bad weather and these kind of things. So they started offering services around that to read the weather, to learn about the weather, and to deal with the weather. Many examples, happy to talk about them afterwards. To finish it up with Steve Jobs. So Steve Jobs said already quite a while ago that this was in 1997 actually at the conference that he said, you always have to start with the customer experience. Don't start with the technology, start with the customer experience. Thank you very much.